Welcome, age of vintage society. When most people think of Ethel Merman, they think only of that big brassy voice. "There's no business like show business" was Merman's signature song, and it encapsulates her image: brassy and camp, cheerful and a little abrasive. Most viewers can probably hum a few bars of this and a few other Merman songs, maybe even offer a decent impression of her legendary singing voice. But how much do they really know about La Merme? Why was Ethel Merman forbidden to ever take singing lessons? Make sure to watch the video until the end and leave your thoughts in the comments. If you are new here, join our wonderful community by subscribing to the Age of Vintage channel. Ethel Merman, the Queen of Musicals. Ethel Merman, the musical comedy star whose belting voice and brassy style entertained Broadway and movie audiences for 50 years. For more than 50 years, singer and actress Ethel Merman was a beloved legend of stage and screen. Her first musical appearance in George and Ira Gershwin's Girl Crazy in 1930 resulted in her instant rise from secretary and occasional club singer to Broadway singing sensation. Merman went on to star in a dozen more stage musicals and numerous films, and continued to perform into her 70s. She was the most successful musical comedy performer of her generation, known for her loud, clear voice and excellent enunciation. She was a favourite of such songwriters as George and Ira Gershwin, Cole Porter and Irving Berlin, and she introduced some of their most popular songs, including I Got Rhythm, You're the Top, and I Get a Kick Out of You. Merman reached her zenith as Rose, the overbearing mother of Gypsy Rose Lee in Jules Stein and Stephen Sondheim's Gypsy, singing such songs as Everything's Coming Up Roses. She appeared in vaudeville and in nightclubs, gave concerts, made records and performed on radio, on television and in films. Her primary achievement was in the 13 roles she created on Broadway between 1930 and 1959. It was the opening night of Annie Get Your Gun on Broadway, and those concerned had a lot at stake. Merman hadn't had a classy hit in years. Irving Berlin's last few musicals had been lackluster. Director Joshua Logan was trying to re-establish himself after his service in World War II. The tension level was high. Waiting in the wings was a terrified young chorus girl, trying to stop her knees from shaking. Suddenly she looked up and saw the show's leading lady, Ethel Merman, standing as calm and solid as the Rock of Gibraltar. There was only one thing moving, Merman's jaws, as she chomped on a giant wad of gum, but her face betrayed no emotion. The near-hysterical Corinne finally found the courage to address the Broadway legend. "Aren't you nervous, Miss Merman?" she asked. Merm looked at the girl as if she had just landed from Mars. "Nervous?" bellowed the star. "Why the hell should I be nervous? I know my lines." With that, she spat her gum into a waiting bucket, strode onto the stage, and walked into Broadway history. That anecdote sums up a few of the many features that made Ethel Merman just who she was: practical, profane, and consummately professional. For 40 years she was one of the goddesses of American musical theatre. She wasn't particularly subtle or unusually versatile, but she did one thing extraordinarily well. Ethel could belt. Back in those pre-microphone days, composers and lyricists got down on their knees at night and thanked God for someone like Merman, who could make each note ring to the rafters while still making sure that every lyric landed in the back row of the balcony. Gershwin, Berlin, Herman, Stein, Arlen, they all sang her praises. Most of the time they even wrote their shows with her in mind. Cole Porter made sure that the money notes of his songs coincided with those that Merman sang best. She was born Ethel Agnes Zimmerman in Astoria, a suburb of New York City, on January 16, 1909. She later shortened her name to Merman because, she said, if you put Zimmerman up in lights, you'd die from the heat. Merman showed an early interest in singing, and her parents, Edward and Agnes, encouraged her. Edward Merman, an accountant, loved to sit at the family piano and sing, and his daughter often joined him. Even then, her voice showed signs of becoming a giant instrument. She noted later in a New Yorker interview that, "The neighbours used to hear me, of course." Merman made her public debut at the age of 5, singing at a Red Cross camp. Her powerhouse voice made its presence known at an early age when she sang in the choir at Holy Redeemer Episcopal Church, and it was just a matter of time before she started being hired to perform at local events. Merman had bigger dreams, but her practical parents wanted her to have something more reliable than show business to fall back on, so they made her attend secretarial school, where she became unusually good at shorthand. She became the secretary to the president of a New York City company who had connections in the entertainment industry. He gave her a letter of introduction to George White, a theatrical producer. White offered Merman a place in the chorus line of Scandals, a long-running and highly popular Broadway revue. Amazingly, she turned down this break because she preferred to sing. Merman continued to work as a secretary, but also began to sing at nightclubs. In 1929, the young starlet contracted a severe case of tonsillitis. Merman agreed to a tonsillectomy despite fears that it would ruin her greatest asset, her big and distinctive voice. To her surprise and delight, once she had recovered and tried singing again, her voice was even more powerful than it had been before the surgery, so tonsillitis improved her voice. Although she never trained professionally as a singer, her powerful, exuberant singing style and flawless diction became locally famous when she began performing in small nightclubs while working during the day as a stenographer, discovered by a Broadway producer. It was while performing between screenings at the Brooklyn Paramount Theatre that producer Vincent Friedley caught her act. Merman made her Broadway debut in 1930 in the George and Ira Gershwin musical Girl Crazy, and the song that launched her career was I Got Rhythm, which she delivers with great verve. Merman was hired and appeared on the programme far down the cast list as Kate Fothergill, bride of a gambler. She didn't have to act much, just show up to raise the roof with 2 showstoppers, I Got Rhythm and Sam and Delilah. On opening night, while singing I Got Rhythm, Merman held a high C for 16 bars. The audience went wild, and she had to perform several encores. Her performance overshadowed the rest of the cast, including the musical star, Ginger Rogers. George Gershwin, who was conducting the orchestra, reportedly ran backstage afterward and told Merman, "Don't ever let anyone give you a singing lesson. It'll ruin you." Merman became an instant star at the age of 21 based on this single performance, and wisely followed Gershwin's advice. Girl Crazy ran for 272 performances, and Merman belted out I Got Rhythm 8 times a week. The Merman legend was born. Unfortunately, America was in the depths of the Great Depression, and there weren't a lot of solid opportunities for a rising musical theatre star. She landed briefly in George White's Scandals of 1931, and then found herself in a troubled musical called Take a Chance. Merman was one of the headliners along with singer Rudy Valley. She sang several numbers, and her solo rendition of Life is Just a Bowl of Cherries made the song a popular hit. Scandals ran on Broadway for 202 performances. Merman then appeared in the musical Humpty Dumpty, a satire of American history. Unfortunately, this show was one of the few flops in Merman's career, and it soon closed without ever leaving Pittsburgh. A couple of disappointing Hollywood films followed, and Merman needed a Broadway hit. So did Vincent Friedley, who was nearly broke after a series of flops. By the next season, Humpty Dumpty had been drastically rewritten and opened on Broadway as Take a Chance. Again, Merman was a hit with audiences, which led to her being offered her first featured role in a Hollywood film. The cast of the film, where not dressing, included such major stars as Bing Crosby and Carole Lombard, but it did not give Merman a real chance to display her singing talent. Her biggest number was singing The Animal in Me, which she shared with a chorus line of 40 elephants. The song was cut from the final film, and after appearing in another minor film role in Kid Millions, Merman decided to return to the New York stage. These experiences foreshadowed what would be a major problem with Merman's screen appearances. She was not a typical screen beauty, and, as she recalled later, the directors constantly told her to hold down her voice, her strong point. Once again she decided to try Hollywood, appearing in the film version of Anything Goes, as well as several more forgettable roles. Again she was disappointed by her film career and returned to Broadway. Through the rest of the 1930s, Merman continued to alternate stage and screen roles. Merman found that she was a hit on stage, but her films were not as successful. Film executives began to feel the same. When Du Barry Was a Lady was filmed, Merman's role was given to Lucille Ball. In 1943, Cole Porter turned to Merman once again when casting his new Broadway musical, Something for the Boys. She developed a severe case of laryngitis, and her understudy had to take over for a week. No wonder she was ready for Annie Get Your Gun and its triumphant anthem, There's No Business Like Show Business. Equally famous composer Jerome Kern had agreed to write the show's songs. However, he died suddenly and Irving Berlin was convinced to step in. Merman's portrayal of Western Mark's woman Annie Oakley proved to be one of her most famous performances. Annie Get Your Gun was a huge hit and ran for 1,147 performances. However, when the show was filmed in 1950, Merman's role went to Betty Hutton. During the 1950s, Merman starred in two more hit stage musicals, Call Me Madam and Gypsy. Call Me Madam had advanced sales of $1 million and ran for 644 performances. Merman also starred in the film version made in 1953. Despite Merman's flashy, self-confident stage and screen image, her personal life never matched the success of her professional life. She was married and divorced 4 times, to film agent William B. Smith, airline president Robert F. Six, publishing executive Robert D. Levitt, and finally actor Ernest Borgnine for 38 days in 1964. Merman's marriage to Borgnine was her 4th, last and briefest. Merman admitted she didn't have the best judgment when it came to men. In a radio interview she noted of her many marriages, "We all make mistakes, that's why they put rubbers on pencils, and that's what I did. I made a few Lulus." Her 1972 memoir, Merman, includes a chapter entitled My Marriage to Ernest Borgnine that consists of nothing more than a single blank page. But don't worry about Borgnine, he got off his own quip too, commenting about the marriage. "Biggest mistake of my life. I thought I was marrying Rosemary Clooney." It may or may not be true that Merman had an affair with Jacqueline Suzanne, queen of the trashy novel. Some say that Merman was spotted making out with the author on a couch at a party. Others assert that Merman, though a staple of homosexual culture, wasn't interested in other women at all. But what's certain is that Suzanne once showed up at Merman's New York apartment, distraught and screaming, "I love you." Suzanne went on to base her Valley of the Dolls character Anne, an aging stage actress, on Merman. She had 2 children with Levitt, who committed suicide years after their divorce. Merman's daughter, nicknamed Ethel Jr., struggled with chronic depression and lost custody of her children to her husband after their divorce. She died in 1967 following a drug and alcohol overdose in a vacation cabin with her visiting young children in the next room. Ethel Jr.'s death was also listed as a suicide, but Merman never accepted that verdict and insisted that her daughter had taken an accidental overdose of prescription medicine. Merman continued to perform well into her 70s. She retired from Broadway in 1970 after starring in Hello, Dolly, but during the 1960s and 70s she frequently appeared on television programs. She was a guest on Judy Garland's variety show and also featured on Batman as Lola Lasagna, The Love Boat and The Muppet Show. Merman also made several films during this time, although none were the hit musicals that had made her famous. With her booming, crystal-clear voice and a natural gift for comedy, she became a favourite of both audiences and composers, nominated for Tony Awards for her performances. Her last major public appearance was at a Carnegie Hall benefit performance in 1982. The next year, Merman underwent surgery to remove a brain tumour that was discovered after she suddenly collapsed in her apartment. However, the tumour was not operable and she continued to decline. Sadly, the woman with a giant singing voice and vibrant stage presence became bedridden and had to struggle to speak even a few words. But through it all she remained the one and only Ethel Merman. She died in New York City, where she had lived her entire life, on February 15th, 1984. No one ever sang quite like her before. No one has ever sung quite like her since. Hearing Merman in her prime on this recording, it's possible to understand how George Gershwin felt when he ran backstage to her dressing room during the intermission of Girl Crazy's opening night, after she had slayed the audience with I Got Rhythm. "Ethel," he asked breathlessly, "do you know what you're doing out there?" She blushed and admitted that she really didn't understand what made her sing the way she did. "That's okay," said Gershwin. "Just don't change a thing, and never, never go near a singing teacher." If you liked this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, subscribe if you are new here, and if you want to support my work, please visit my Patreon page. Now it is your turn. What do you think about the life and legacy of Ethel Merman? No performer of the 20th century made a greater impact on the American musical theatre than Ethel Merman.